Madison Select Board, Tuesday, December 27th, 2022. Everybody join me pledging the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let it show, just Mr. Vinziano is not here today. AP warrant number 19, 12/12/22, number 20, 12/13/22, payroll register number 14, 12/8/22, number 50, 12/15/22. Do I have a motion to accept them?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor. Acceptance of the meeting minutes from December 12, 2022.
Move to accept.
I'll second that.
Any questions? All in favor? All in favor. Old business, Selectmen's concern from immediate proceeding meeting. Mr. Moody?
Yeah, I have one. Tim, when we talked about chip seal, and we had a citizen's concern there on that, I noticed that the letter said we might want to reach out and check with the Department of DEP. Did we get anything back?
No, I did reach out to our local contact with DEP to see if they had any thoughts on chip seal, and he said no, they do not, and he deferred everybody back to Maine DOT. So it's kind of like the circle.
So that's about as far as we can do, and
Right, to reiterate what DEP said, or what DOT said, is the chemicals that are used in general asphalt, that you use on all roads, they're the same chemicals that are used in that adherent to chip seal. If there is a concern about the dust, that's usually only during the application period,
Right.
and that you can kind of maybe deal with by asking the contractor where they're going to get their material from.
yeah, because I know this last one we did out by your place, the dust, but the one before, there was no dust.
Right.
So,
And the chip stone material they used was different,
yeah,
from a different source as it had been in previous years.
well, I guess we learned from that.
That's right.
Thank you.
Mr. Manton?
I'm all second.
And I'm all set. Okay, items of communication.
All right, I put in your packets just a couple of pages from Waste Management, just letting you know that the contract we have with Waste Management to handle not only what we bring across the scales at the front gate from commercial haulers, but also the contract we have with them to use the back gate. That will be up in July, end of June, July 1st. They have proposed a 5-year contract renewal with 5% increases per year. Just by comparison, the last contract we were in only had a 2.5% increase per year, so that's a pretty significant difference. I think on my notes there, I probably jotted down what the expectation would be. Right now, we're paying $76.50 a ton for every ton that we take over the scale at the front gate. So any of the 5 commercial haulers in Madison, when they take residential trash over there, we're paying $76 a ton. According to the contract, that'll go up to $79.50 in the coming year, and over the next 5 years, that'll end up going up to $96.63. So that's 5% a year. It's about a 25% jump from where we are now. That comparison that I gave you, they provided for me to show all the different communities that use their facility and all the various negotiated terms, and you can see we come in a little bit below average. There's also a comparison there for demo. We don't pay for demo. The only time that the town would pay for demo across the front gate is if the town had a project and the town was tearing something down, and either the highway crew was taking it over there or we hired somebody to take a container over. So we generally do not pay for demo. If a commercial builder is doing a demo project, they pay for their own materials on that. The back gate would also go up at that same rate of 5%. So entering into this contract negotiation, that's kind of their initial offer. Really, all we can do is maybe go back and consider either shortening the term from 5 years to 3 years to see what inflation looks like in 3 years, or to maybe stair-step the increase or step it down. Obviously, they're looking at their costs going up like everything else, but does that warrant a 25% increase over 5 years? So those are some of the things I'll be bringing to you a little bit when we get into this more officially in this waste management contract. I don't know if the board had any questions on that. All right. I wanted to let you know that the East Madison Fire Station, the generator project, that facility's never had a generator before, now it does. And that was paid for partly with a FEMA grant. So it's been installed. We processed all the invoices. They were actually in the warrant that you signed tonight. And we submit those costs to FEMA and they'll reimburse us 50%. The total project was $12,700, so we're expecting to get about $6,300 back. And so that was a good project for us. At the last meeting, the board had asked me to meet with George Demchak with the Anson Madison Starks Ambulance Service to talk about some concerns that Madison Fire had about seeing if Anson Fire was being toned for calls in Madison. So I did sit down with George Demchak and some folks from AMS. He made it pretty clear that Madison always gets toned first, and that's the protocols from the comm center for any calls in Madison. But he said the staff at AMS, they have their own discretion. So if they arrive on the scene and they think they need more hands or more help, or they don't feel that the response is coming quick enough, then at their discretion, they're going to tone for assistance. Because Anson has 2 full-time firefighters Monday through Friday from 7 to 5 during the day, they're more inclined to tone Anson because they know that there are hands there. So I relayed this information back to Don, our fire chief. I think Don still has some frustrations, and I think there's a lack of trust there, but I believe that they answered all of my questions and all of Don's questions satisfactorily. And I confirmed both with AMS and with the town of Anson that they're not paying them. So AMS is not paying Anson Fire to respond to these calls. And so those were some of the thoughts that the rumor mill had been going around, and I asked the questions and I got satisfactory answers from them. So I guess all of you are on the AMS board anyhow, so if there's further discussion, it probably should happen at that level. So.
How much do these guys get for going on these calls?
They would only get, so a full-time firefighter like Anson has, they're getting paid anyways.
Right.
So if one of our Madison firefighters responded to a call, they would get their hourly, on-call rate, which right now is about $17 an hour. So, but like I said, Anson's not paying Anson people, or AMS, I should say. AMS is not paying Anson Fire, and they're not paying Madison Fire to respond. Those are in-house costs.
Hello.
Oh, yes. Mr. Miller?
Again, I understand what you're saying, and I understand the whole situation, Tim. I just hope there is some courtesy and common sense that goes along with it. If they've got a situation, they just need a lift. I mean, that's not an exigent circumstance. If there's an exigent circumstance, call anybody you want, how many you want. I understand that part of it, but I think at the same time, the protocol that is set up down there at the comm center, I think AMS should use that as close as possible.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I can foresee is that I think they're taking a little bit of advantage of their authority sometimes, and this is what's ticking off the different agencies around them.
The one instance that really kind of triggered everything was an instance to a call to assist someone who was down on the ground on Naomi Avenue, way out in East Madison. And so AMS, they did tone Madison, and one of our guys responded and was on his way over there. When the AMS people got there, the situation they assessed was there was a very heavy person on the ground, well over 300 pounds.
Ooh.
And he wasn't conscious, so they had to get him out from underneath the vehicle and get him up in the ambulance. So they immediately toned Anson to come over. And so the question that I prompted to George was, if you're in East Madison, why would you tone Anson? Why didn't you tone Skowhegan? Wouldn't they have had people there that could have been there faster? And George admitted, he says, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to the people on the ground assessing the situation. They know they're going to need more than 2 people to get this guy in the ambulance. And so who do they call and how fast do they get there? So,
And it's always been that agencies such as fire and TAM, they have their turf that they protect pretty well.
yeah.
And we're lucky that we have the assistance back and forth that we do.
I was pleased with the professional courtesy that George showed me. when we had
That's
that
good.
conversation.
Yep.
So I want to give you an update on the recall petition. So Triss, the town clerk, received gathered signatures today. She has not completed reviewing them all, but she believes that she has at least 200 legitimate signatures on that recall petition. So at the next selectmen's meeting, she will bring that petition to you as a board, and you will have to decide the timing of the election. She'll give you some parameters on there, but so far they've met the criteria so far. They needed 194 legit signatures. That's all public information, so anybody who wants to see these petitions, they're there at the town office. So if they've met that threshold, then the next thing is to meet with the board and set a schedule for a recall election. And so that will be on January the 9th that we'll be doing that. So 2 weeks from yesterday, basically. And the only other thing I'd add is probably at the last meeting in January, the 23rd, I'd like to have a short assessors meeting. There's been 2 or 3 cases where we've had to do some small abatements, tree growth penalties, supplemental bills, nothing major, pretty small stuff. But I don't want to let it go too long before the board acts on it.
This is on the 9th?
Now this one, I'd like to do this on the 23rd.
Okay.
So the last meeting in January.
Okay.
And if we could, we'd maybe just meet at 6 instead of 6:30 and get that assessor's work taken care of. So that's all I have for communications.
Okay. Discuss posting the road commissioner's position.
So I'd like to start by just giving you an update on the last couple of weeks. As everybody knows, we've had a couple of back-to-back storms on the weekends, one with a lot of snow, one with a lot of rain. That 15 inches of wet, heavy snow on the weekend of the 16th, that resulted in about 30 hours of overtime for the 5 full-time workers that we have up there. We were shorthanded on that. We had 3 people out for various reasons, but the 5 that did it did the best they could with what they had. And by the time the extra help was able to get in 2 or 3 days later, they were able to get things cleaned up. Like I had mentioned, with the exception of students having to walk with no sidewalks cleared on that Monday, everything else was cleared up pretty quickly. Had we had one more person on Friday night, we may have been able to put somebody in the sidewalk machine a day earlier and get those sidewalks clear. But it was just an issue of manpower. This past week, we had 3 inches of rain. We have identified about 5 minor washouts in certain areas. One at the end of Golf Course Road, a little bit of washout on Kincaid Road, something up on Boardman Road where the pavement's caving in. So, all things considered, our crew was pretty busy this past weekend with chasing ice, because all the rain led to freezing and ice, so you're chasing all that. And this week they've been pretty busy filling in and temporarily patching a lot of these washout spots. So 2 back-to-back storms, pretty significant. But if there's one thing that I realized from this experience, these are good examples of why we need a full-time road commissioner. We need someone who's an equipment operator that can assist. I can get up early and drive around and look at roads. I can order salt. I can confer with the foreman as to what needs to be done. But when you don't have that extra set of hands that can operate equipment, it really hamstrings your ability to get things done quickly and safely. So I'd just like to see what the consensus of the board is. You have a couple of options. One, you can just wait this whole thing out until somebody takes out papers in April and gets elected in June. That's not my recommendation. My recommendation is that the board authorize me to post this position now to see if we get some candidates and we can interview them and perhaps hire someone that the board can appoint to finish out the term until June. So I'm looking for direction from the board.
Well,
Yes.
my feeling is that we should post it, and the only reason that I'm saying that right at this point in time is we're headed into some serious weather conditions, who knows what, coming up until spring. Otherwise, I think I might say wait if we were closer to June, but to me, we need to get somebody, and we need to get them soon.
Yes, Ron?
Yeah, I agree on the posting. And I guess the reason I'm agreeing on it so well is that, let's see what's out there right now. I mean, the longer we wait, I mean, it doesn't mean we've got to do anything, but let's see what's out there and what's available right now. But I mean, this is a poor time to look for one this time of year in the middle of snow season, but let's see what's out there.
Yeah, again, your guess is as good as mine as to what you're going to get for applicants. But at the same time, anything that you're hiring for, you can't hire in 1 or 2 months. It's a long process.
Do you have any idea, or would you check to see what towns our size are paying road commissioners along with the benefit package? Would you check on that to give us some kind of a guideline?
So, in your, I don't know if you had a chance to get to your boxes today, but I did print out some sample road commissioner job posting. It wasn't in that original packet. I saw that you had yours picked up. So
I think I have one of those.
do you have one?
Good.
This is based quite heavily on the town of Skowhegan and what Skowhegan did this past summer. And basically what it says in the first line, it kind of clarifies that situation, that you're looking for a person that, unless it changes, that person would have to take out papers if they wanted to continue. So the first line says the town is seeking a full-time position of road commissioner. The position will be appointed until the June 23 election. Thereafter, it will be subject to the election process. And then from there, it goes on pretty much to give a pretty basic description of the job. You're overseeing staff. You are organizing, directing, and coordinating all phases of public works, including street, sidewalk, storm drain maintenance and construction, snow and ice removal, facilities, automotive and equipment maintenance, and the admin work. And I also added in there that in Madison, the road commissioner is also a tree warden, which pertains to trees which are in the road right away. Administering department work priorities, planning and implementing work programs, making complicated technical and administrative decisions. Work is performed with a high degree of independence under the general direction of the select board and in coordination with the town manager. The ideal candidate will have considerable administrative and operational public works experience, graduation from standard high school or vocational school, supplemented by some college level coursework in engineering, bookkeeping, or any equivalent combination of experience and training, and should possess a state Class 2 motor vehicle driver's license. Any thoughts or questions or comments?
I think I would take out that storm drain maintenance and construction, because that is owned by the sanitary district. They they do bill it and they bill the town, but that's the way it's set up.
All right. Anything else?
No, that's it for me.
Good. So if it's okay with the board, I'd like to go ahead and post this this week and see if we get any feedback on it. Then I would schedule, after I meet with the potential people, I would then just schedule an executive session for them to meet with you. And if we get to that point where I believe that there are good candidates, then, and since this is a position that you'll end up appointing anyways, and if it stays elected, then it'll end up being a mutual relationship between elected officials. So that I think warrants the involvement of the entire board in this process. And I don't have a problem with that.
Do you request a vote to post this, or just go ahead?
I think unless there's any objections, I don't think you need to
You just need consensus.
yeah, just consensus that everybody's in agreement.
I'm not opposed.
Okay.
The only thing I have a concern about, are we gonna go with elected by the people, or are we gonna keep it appointed by the selectmen?
Well, we can't change it till town meeting.
Right now, it's elections.
Yeah.
Right now, it's elected.
So technically, I'll give you this food for thought. In your packets, there's an email from MMA, because I did ask this question. If the board wanted to see if the people would be willing to change from elected to appointed before town meeting, you'd have to do it 90 days before town meeting. And you have your options. You could either hold a special town meeting and vote on it that way, or you could hold a referendum and have people come to the polls and vote on that question, whether or not they wanted to continue elected or appointed. So keep that in mind when you meet on January 9th, because it appears you're going to have to schedule a referendum election for this recall. And the timing could be such that it would be 90 days before town meeting. So if you did want to change from elected to appointed, or see if the people would be open to that, you could add that to that referendum ballot. I talked with Trish about that today, and she said that that would be, certainly doable. So.
Yeah, yes, and I think the key word, what you just said, is to see if the people, what they want. Do they want to keep it the way it is? Do they want to change it?
Right.
And if we can get that in on that special election, let them tell us what they want. I mean, for years, they wanted the say on the road commission.
Yep.
That's been that way for years, but things change.
He actually just answered my question.
Okay. So just keep that in mind. At your next meeting, you'll have to set an election date anyhow. And if you want to determine what the ballot looks like, if you want to add that question on there, that would be your opportunity to do that at the next meeting on January 9th.
Okay, anything else? No? All right. Number 2, continue review of personnel policy.
So if you kept your personnel policy notes from last time, we're going to pick up on page 7. And I'd like to make it through page 12 or 13 tonight. So we'll go as fast as the board wants to go. So at the top of page 7, we left this question of how do we pay out accrued vacation time. Let's say someone resigns and they've got 120 hours worth of vacation time on the books. according to this policy, the way it's written, that person resigns on Friday, and then the next pay period comes up, we would pay them all 120 hours of vacation in one lump sum. That's the way it's written. That hasn't been our practice. That isn't our practice right now. With people who have recently resigned, we are paying them 40-hour increments every week based on their request for us to do that. So last week, or last meeting, Representative Ducharme, who, as you all know, had a very heavy hand in writing this policy, he said that's state law. And I said, okay. So I went to him afterwards, I said, clarify what state law. So that's what this little sheet of paper is in your thing. This is state law, and state law basically says an employer has to pay out unused vacation time at the end of their separation with the employee. If the employee leaves on good terms, and the state says you have to pay out their vacation. But the state does not say how you pay out your vacation. That's still up to you in your policy. You can do it all in one lump sum, or you can stretch it out.
Hello. Yes.
I think what we have done in the past is it's been a courtesy to the employee. How would you like to have this? Would you want it in one lump sum, or do you want it paid out in increments? And I think most of them have gone with the increment payments.
Right.
And not the lump sum.
Right.
And I think that's just a courtesy the town, should be able to confer with the person that's getting done, which way they want it done. I know what the state law says, but like you say, it's open-ended also.
The state law gives a lot of deference to each employer's policy.
Right.
So,
And there's gonna be more money in their pocket if they break it down systematically.
it's less money in the state's pocket.
Well, yeah, we're not worried about state, they get their money anyway.
So what I'm doing is I'm just making notes as I go through here about every part in here that's going to require a board action or board approval eventually. So if to do what Mr. Moody said, the board would actually have to change the wording of this section. Because right now it says one lump sum. But if we want to give it a little more flexibility to the discretion of the employee and the town manager to pay it out over, how they request, because they may request a lump sum. But, so I'm just letting you know that as we go, that every time I star a little section here, we'll come back to it in future meetings, you'll have to take action on it.
I just have a question with regard to that. Is it more costly for the town to do that, paying it out every 40 hours, or is it more efficient financially to give them, which is what most companies do, to give them their money when they hit the door, or the next week or whatever?
I don't know from a bookkeeping standpoint if it actually costs the town money. However, it does cost the time and effort to prepare that payroll every week. So if you have one or two more employees that are no longer working that you're still preparing payroll for, that adds to the time. Now, we only process about 16 to 20 payrolls a week. There's recreation time and fire department time, that number swells up to 50. But for the most part, it's a 3 or 4 hour process.
It just seems to me that if the employee is leaving, they should take that with them at the time they leave and not. That's just my opinion.
Okay. That's why we'll discuss it further.
Okay.
So, section 5 is called employment practices, and we're going to jump right into the standard work week, where we have been dealing with something for the past year, back and forth about hours worked. So if you look at sections 1 through 4, they're pretty standard. Everybody's hours are established by the department head and the town manager. Highway works 6 a.m. to 4:30. The town office works 7:30 to 4. That's established, right? The work week is established. It starts Monday at 12:01 a.m. and ends at 11:59 the following Sunday. An employee's time may be changed by the department head, and collectively, department schedules can be changed. So all of that is pretty much boilerplate. This idea of hours worked is number 5, and we've gone back and forth on this. Hours worked shall be comprised of all time during which an employee is necessarily required to be on the employer's premises, on duty, or in a prescribed workplace. If an employee is allowed to work before their shift, during meals, or after their shift, the extra time will be considered hours worked. Employees who work before or after scheduled work without authorization will be paid for their time, but may be subject to disciplinary action. Paid leave for any purpose shall not be counted as hours worked. I'm going to pause right there. Paid leave, which is vacation time, sick time, bereavement time, or holiday, shall not be counted as hours worked. That's how it is written in the highway contract. So it stops right there. In our personnel policy, we've gone back and forth and we've added this: paid leave shall not be counted as hours worked unless expressly permitted by the town manager. Now, it used to say expressly permitted by the town, and then we went back and forth on this by the town manager. So I'll give you an example from this past week with the highway department. They worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Because the town had 2 days off for Christmas, day before and day after, or day of Christmas, and highway does not normally work hours on Friday, they had Thursday as their Christmas Eve. That was their paid holiday. So when you look at their time card, they had 10 hours Monday, 10 hours Tuesday, 10 hours Wednesday, and then 10 hours of holiday pay. But because of the storm, we called most everybody in for 2 or 3 hours on Friday, not on Thursday, which was their holiday, but on Friday. So when I looked at their time cards today, if they worked 3 or 4 hours on Friday, that was not overtime. That was straight time. Because that holiday pay didn't bump them into overtime. And that's how highway works. It's taken me a while to get my head around this, but that's not how our office has worked. In the past, if we had a sick day or vacation day or holiday, and the person had 2 or 3 hours extra in their 4 days that they worked, that bumps them into overtime. So we got to iron this out to make sure it's consistent for all of our employees. And
I feel it should be the same as the highway.
And that's why I say if you look at this language, it stops. If you just put a period after hours worked, boom, that's it.
Because it is hours work.
Right. Now, if a person works 42, 43 hours, and that's because of an 8-hour holiday, they'll still get paid for those. We're not going to take the hours away. We're still going to get paid for them, but it's not at time and a half. That's the way it works in highway right now.
And that's the way it works most every place that I've ever worked.
Okay.
Ron?
Does this fall in the contract with the union?
Right. So
Does this fall right along with that?
right. So if you stop right where it says hours worked and no exceptions, that's the way it's written in the highway contract.
All right.
How do you feel about that, Tom?
I think it's more consistent, but I think there's another thing that we need to look at when we get to overtime. And that's whether overtime is based on 40 hours a week or it's based on 8 hours a day. So that I think you can do this by ending this at hours worked if you allow for a little more leeway in the hours worked in one day. And I'll get to that when I get to it.
The only thing on those pay cards is vacation time and overtime and sick time. Sick time, I have a problem with. And vacation time, you're gonna take a week off, but if they're done, then they get paid out, right? Or we're gonna leave it up.
If you have vacation time on the books, according to the state, you have to pay it.
Okay, but, so every time I have a vacation time, I get paid.
I'm not following you, right? You're
Well,
saying
I mean-
if you put in for vacation and you have the vacation earned, yes,
Okay,
you'll get paid for it.
so, all right, so on my time card, I write vacation time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now, Friday, no, we'll say Monday, I'm not feeling good, and I work 4 hours, and I'm going home.
Yep.
So I can put sick time down on that 4 hours,
You can if you have enough sick time in the bank.
okay? How about Tuesday, if I'm 5 hours, and then I don't feel good, I put down sick time, I go home again.
Well, in the world we live in right now, if you went home sick on Monday, we don't want you to come in on Tuesday if you're still feeling sick. So,
Okay, how about if I come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday?
are you sick or you're not sick?
Sick time, you feeling sick time?
If a person is sick and they can't come to work or they shouldn't come to work, if they use more than 2 days in a row, they got to get a note from their doctor. That's in the personnel policy. So there's parameters in there that keep you from abusing the sick time.
Okay,
Now, if you're talking about a person who has left the employment of the town and they want their sick time paid out, that's in here as well.
all right, so why don't we just pay it out, is what I'm getting at,
Paid out when?
when they're done?
All of it?
Yeah,
So
the sick time, I mean, they get 8 hours, they get 8 hours in 1 month, right?
for sick time, they earn 8 hours every month. Yeah.
Right, so I like to see them, they go up to 300, I read a little bit ahead. They go up
360,
to
yeah.
360, and in that time, they can use whatever they want. And then when they get done, they should probably have 360 left, so they can accumulate a bunch of money.
They could. And right now, the way it's written, if you did read ahead, if you have less than 20 years with the town, you get paid out 25%.
Right.
So if you got 360 hours left, you're only getting, Al's not here to help me with my math, but I think 90 hours is all you're gonna get. If you've been there 20 plus years, you get it all. So that's a longevity incentive that's in there. If you read the fine print here, if you were hired after July 1st, 2015, you don't get paid out any sick time, regardless of how long you work for the town. So we have 3 different standards for sick time payout. When we get there, I think we should address that. So if you look at number 6, this idea of pyramiding or duplication of compensation for overtime. This is very complicated. I asked legal for a definition. The definition they gave me is even more confusing than what we had in here. But I believe if you don't allow employees to use their vacation time to get overtime, then you eliminate the need for this language about pyramiding down here. Do you know what pyramiding is?
Well, you shouldn't be able to do that.
Right, right.
I mean,
And that's what it
I don't
says.
even know why
There
it's-
shall be no pyramiding.
I
but-
don't know why it's even in here, because
Okay.
if you, I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but that's ridiculous.
That's a no-no.
It really doesn't make any sense.
No.
I mean, if we're watching the store, we not gonna like. Sorry.
Okay. So section 5, letter B is rest time, and that's pretty standard language. 15-minute breaks, unpaid, half-hour lunch unpaid. Cleanup time, and I think all of our employees utilize this, whether you're cashing out at the counter or whether you're cleaning up your stall in the highway garage. Any questions on breaks or cleanup time? Pretty standard stuff. All right, letter D on page 8 is prohibited conduct. And this is where I recommend moving some stuff around. On your desks, I gave you a copy of all the appendices. So I don't want to go through all of these, but I'm just going to give them to you. You can read them at your leisure. But all these, appendix 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, are all the things that most offices don't want you to do. What's prohibited conduct, what's harassment, drug and alcohol, solicitation, all that's what's all included in your appendixes. So that's why I would just write in here prohibited conduct. I would put a paragraph about harassment that's already in this on letter K, and I would just move that to this spot here. Have a general concept about harassment in here, hostile work environment, that sort of thing, and then just refer to all these appendixes. because every one of these appendix languages are taken right from HR 101, and you can get them from the state. You can get updated ones. I mean, my goodness, the world we live in, our sexual harassment policy is way out of date because it doesn't deal with 9/10 of all the potential harassments out there today. So you kind of have to update these things. So that's my thought of just updating our appendices, and putting some language in there about employee behavior, that sort of thing. And any thoughts on that? Most of this is boilerplate and stuff. And again, we can come back to this since I just gave you these documents tonight. We can always come back and say, okay, I want to go over this. But for the sake of our time tonight, that's my recommendation, is to just utilize the documents that we already have. So on page 8, section E is our disciplinary process. We have a progressive disciplinary process, as most workplaces do. Your department head is to offer guidance when you're doing something that's prohibited or out of bounds, or messing with somebody else. You determine whether the employee is aware, notify them that disciplinary action may be taken, explain to them, give them an opportunity to defend themselves, have a written report that they sign off on in their personnel file, and then you can move to more strict discipline as the situation warrants itself. Any questions on the disciplinary process? Now, following that is letter F, which is the grievance procedure. And this is pretty much word for word what's in the highway contract. If you have a grievance. Now, grievance means different things in the highway contract, but the process is pretty much the same. An employee can make a note, put it in writing, discuss any problems that they may have had with their immediate supervisor. If the problem is with the immediate supervisor, they can go to the next step, the town manager, and then of course to the select board if they need to. So that's page 9 into the top of page 10. Any questions on the grievance process? Letter G is safety. One of the things that we have done over the years is form a safety committee, even though that's not in our personnel policy specifically. I would recommend putting that in there. Letter H is property and equipment. Making sure it's properly cared for, kept in good working order, that sort of thing. Letter I is revocation or loss of a motor vehicle license or other licenses. Now, clearly, if an employee is required to have a certain license to do their job and they lose it, they may be suspended without pay until they get that license back. Employees have a duty to keep all their licenses, insurance, and certificates up to date. Now, the yellow part I added in here because there are certifications that the state requires us to have for code enforcement, plumbing inspector, health inspector, and there's certifications that we can attain that help us in our jobs, such as general assistance, treasurer certification, clerk, and tax collector. And then there are services that we provide if we are a notary public. So I added those in there as a stronger way of saying employees are expected to get these certifications and keep their certifications if their job warrants it. Not everybody has to be a notary public, not everybody has to be a certified tax collector, but it helps if your job requires it. Any thoughts or comments on that? So it's more than just a Class 2 license. There's certifications that all the employees need. All right. I discovered that everything in item J electronic communications, that goes to the bottom of page 10 and all the way through page 11, is exactly the same as the appendix number 6, I believe. So, I'm not sure why we did that, why we have a full appendix that's stuck into the policy, but I would just, it's all the language is the same, I would just take it out of the policy and leave it as an appendix. So that being said, you move to the bottom of page 11, letter K, harassment. If you flip the page to the top of page 12, there's the paragraph on harassment. This is what I would move back to prohibited conduct and just reference those appendixes. And the last two items there under section 5 are performance reviews and job descriptions. Performance reviews that's language we already have. Job descriptions, I thought that we should put in our personnel policy to ensure that we have them and we are motivated to keep them updated. So any questions, any thoughts on that section? I know that was pretty fast, but I'm sure that you've been reading this over the Christmas holiday anyhow. As you go to sleep, as you expect Santa to come, that sort of thing. So I have two other things real quick. And one of them is this overtime thing that I talked about on page 12. Starting in section 6, employee benefits, overtime. Section 1 says, employees shall receive time and 1/2 their base hourly rate for hours worked in excess of 40 hours per pay period. I believe that this is one of the reasons why we had people who wanted to get overtime if they worked 16 hours in one day and they took Thursday and Friday off later that week. What we just covered in the previous section doesn't allow that. But I can certainly understand if you've got a bookkeeper that's working on an audit and she's got to get things ready for the audit, it's going to take her 10 or 12 hours in one day to do that. But she's taking Friday off too. Is it fair for her not to get paid overtime for putting that in? Election clerks. You know, this is where your register of voters and your town clerk, they work 16 hours straight during an election. But if they take time off later that week, this policy puts them in jeopardy of not getting paid overtime for it. So the simple recommendation is to change 40 hours a week to 8 hours a day. And again, that would make you consistent with your highway contract. Because right now the highway contract does pay workers for more than 10 hours in a day because they work 4/10. All the other employees work 5/8. So if you change this from 40 hours a week to 8 hours a day, you would allow them to get their overtime when that job required it. Overtime still has to be approved by their manager, but you would get that 8 hours of overtime or overtime after 8 hours, and they could still use their holiday, vacation, personal time later in the week if they wanted to. Wheels are turning.
I don't like it.
Okay.
And the reason I don't like it is I feel that you work 40 hours, anything over 40 hours, you should get paid time and a half.
Yep.
Okay? The first thing that does, it makes it a lot simpler for the bookkeeper.
Yep.
40 hours, that's it. I believe it's too easy to say anything over 8 hours a day, you get time and a half. I feel it's too easy that system can be taken advantage of. And it puts a heck of a lot more responsibility on whoever that division head is. They're gonna have to, keep their eye on it all the time and check it and stuff. That's some of the reasons why I don't like it. I think if you work over 40 hours, yes, you need to get paid and compensated for it, but over accident circumstances, I can agree with anything over 8 hours, but that's just my feelings about it.
I agree with Ron in the processing piece of it, 40 hours, it's so easy. You work 40 hours, anything over that is
Right.
time and a half. With the, I really don't understand why we need to do the 8-hour thing. Again, because what it's doing is it's putting the onus on whoever the supervisor is to make sure that this isn't abused. And you could simply avoid abuse by leaving it at 40. I don't really understand. Can you give me a good example of, because I mean, if they're gonna take Friday off and they haven't worked 40, why would they get overtime?
So this
guess that's my
is where it goes back to past practice
Well, yeah.
and how certain people view their overtime. So, you know, the clearest example is election day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, election day, you have 2 or 3 employees that are gonna work anywhere from 12 to 16 hours on that day. Now, if they work every day that week, they have 8 hours of overtime on that Tuesday, they'll have 48 hours and they'll get paid their overtime.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have employees who have been there 10 or 15 years that have banked a lot of time. They're fried after election day. They want to take Thursday and Friday off. So they would say, why are you punishing me by not paying me my time and a half for election day just because I want to use my earned vacation time at the end of the week?
That clears it up for me, but I still think it should not be that. We should not be able to do that.
So again, this is
Unless it may be on a case-by-case basis. And then here we go again.
right.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna hold to no vacation time adding to your hours worked, as you just did on page 7, and you're gonna hold to no overtime unless you work 40 hours in a week, that's fine. But we're gonna have to change our practices, because it's been our practice not to do that. It's been our practice to allow people to take that time off and get time and a half. So I'm fine with whatever the board decides that they want to be consistent moving forward. And again, I go back to, that's the way it is in a highway contract. They still get, they would still get their time, it just wouldn't be a time and a half. It'd be straight time.
So I just have a question. So the people that are doing the elections, those are normally their job is from 7 to 5. About. So if there's a young woman working in a town office, she has children at home. Here it is election, and we're expecting her to be there for 16 hours, and she's having to be gone from her children and pay extra hours because she's working, late hours. I think that it's very reasonable if we're going to have good employees in this town that want to be dedicated to what they're doing, that, helping. I mean, it doesn't sound like this happens once a week. This is a unusual thing that happens occasionally. And, if I normally got out of work at 5 o'clock, but I had to work until 9 o'clock on election day, I don't think that it's asking too much for us to benefit those people for their helping, for their being there.
The thing I think also along that line is if somebody comes in at 5 to 4, and you gotta wait on them, and now all of a sudden it's 10 after 4, and you haven't put away your money and counted it up and all this other stuff, and so you get 15 minutes overtime. You see that a lot on the time cards. And
You do, but the reason you see that on the time cards is that quarter of an hour here and there has led to 42 hours in the week. So if that person took sick or vacation, that money shouldn't be overtime, that should be straight time.
did the person stay late?
Right, they did.
So they should have overtime.
Not according to this policy. That's not what's written down.
I know. But I think that they should. I mean, if they want to take vacation time Thursday, Friday, go ahead. Just get 8 hours each each day.
But for that day that you worked 8.5 hours,
You get,
you want a
then,
half-hour overtime.
then you get a half hour overtime that week.
There are ways to do that, but not the way this policy is written. So,
Because, you know, sometimes, I mean, 15 minutes isn't a whole lot of time, but you're right, when it starts adding up, then it makes a difference. And even when it adds up that much,
and that's a more common scenario than what she brought up. Somebody working 16 hours a day is once or twice a year.
I see the gap.
Right, so you see that 4:15, 4:20, 4:30, where, what are we doing? We're helping somebody register their vehicle, and they came in at 10 minutes to 4. So we're gonna do that. We're not gonna kick them out. But at the same time, how do we compensate the people? So, okay. So this, I'm making my notes here as to circle back to this. The last thing I want to touch on, if you have a minute to turn to page 18, this is a issue that just came up actually a year and a half ago. And it's in the yellow in the middle of the page when it comes to payment in lieu of taking our medical or hospital insurance. So basically, a full-time employee who has the ability to have medical and hospital coverage from another source and can provide proof of that, they may receive an additional contribution to their retirement plan capped at $7,000. So for an individual's insurance plan, it costs the town about $15,000 a year. For a family plan, it costs about $24,000 a year. So this payment in lieu was offered, and at the time, the only employee that qualified for it was me. And so since I have proof of insurance from my spouse, I receive a $7,000 additional contribution to my retirement. In the past few months, we've hired other people that are not taking our insurance. And so they've asked if this is eligible to them. And I wanted to ask you first, is this something you want to do for new employees at the very day they start, or after a 6-month probationary period?
On this one here, you're using it for what?
Retirement.
No, you're giving them $7,000 for what?
For not taking the health insurance.
Taking what health insurance?
Taking the
Maybe
town's
you-
health insurance.
Right. I always believe, use it or lose it. That's my belief. I mean, you shouldn't get paid for doing what? Nothing.
Well, you're saving the town money.
Take insurance, take your single plan. I'd rather have it that way than giving you money.
Okay, this is why we're talking about this.
Yep.
So I need to
How
know
much
what
is a single plan? 10,000?
14.
14,000?
Yeah. So you're saving the town $7,000 by utilizing this payment in lieu. And payment in lieus are simply recruiting and retention tools. If you're going to hire somebody, you can use this as a tool if they're maybe military, retired, something like that. They have their own insurance. It's a way of offering it. And $7,000 is light. There are places out there that'll pay you $20,000 for not taking the insurance. So my question, it's in the policy. So my question to you is, do you want it right out of the gate to an employee or after the probationary period to an employee?
I personally think everything should start at the end of the probationary period. That's what the probationary period is for, to see if that person or employee is going to be able to handle the job that's been offered to them, or be able to do the job.
Does insurance start when they start?
Insurance starts when they start. They roll onto the insurance the next month. So if they start in the middle of the month, their insurance starts the next month.
So if they opt out of the insurance, then
Right.
what we're suggesting is that they don't receive the additional pay until they've been here.
Right.
So,
If you make it a condition of the probationary period, right. thoughts?
Yeah, I don't mind doing it, I think, you know, because some of these companies now are doing sign-on bonuses, but I think you have to wait for a period of time to, you know, before you do that.
Yeah.
I understand insurance starts 30 days after, but it's still a savings to the town, and if you do this for one, you should do it for everybody.
You make a good point about sign-on bonuses. Most of those bonuses, people don't realize, just hearing the news, that you don't get paid that bonus unless you stay there 6 months, a year, 18 months, whatever they establish. So that's consistent, that's good. And this isn't pay, this is retirement.
So, quick question, too, I don't want to belabor it, but, so this is just going toward retirement, that extra?
Right. That's the only
that-
option.
It's not paid into their weekly?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Tim, do they have to show that they have insurance from somewhere else?
Right.
So they're not uninsured?
Exactly. They can't be uninsured according to the policy.
Great.
Okay, that's all I wanted to cover. Thank you.
What, before we go here, what is the page you're gonna start on next?
Yeah. Good. We'll probably start on page 12. That'll give you guys a couple weeks to think about 40 hours or 8 hours. And we'll come right back to that.
Okay. Selectmen's concern. Mr. Moody?
None, sir.
Mr. Manor?
None.
Good. I have a couple here. One is, when I get thinking about this, looking this over and everything, and I think about the town manager being able to being the only body hiring fire, I still think that we should think about, while we're doing this, get on the committees, we should be part of the hiring, either one or two people on that hiring committee. And we should also be involved with the negotiations. I'm still a little confused on why we should take and have the personnel policy necessarily mirror the people up at the county garage. I don't think we should have to do that. I mean, they're altogether different jobs. They get different hourly rates. But this is something we can talk about. And the other thing was I did some other research, and on the hiring, firing, I couldn't find anything writing about that. We have something writing about that?
About hiring and firing?
Yeah, who does all that stuff?
Right.
We're gonna come across that later, or we already cover it now?
Let me just see here. So under definitions on page 4, the appointing authority means the town manager.
Okay.
Appointing authority is also described as hiring.
Bob, are you suggesting that we have a committee, because we don't have one?
No, I'm just saying, I don't think we should put everything onto the manager. I think we should take a more active role.
But we'd have to change
That's one.
how we're looking at that.
So right now you have your personnel policy, and then you also have your town ordinances, because you don't have a town charter. Sometimes you'll hear people say, "Oh, it's in our town charter." Madison does not have a town charter, so all it has to go by are its ordinances and the personnel policy. But Madison is a town meeting, town manager form of government, which means that you have to take your budget decisions and ordinance changes to town meeting. You can't do that at this level. But you also hire a town manager, and that town manager has the authority to hire and fire. For example, the town of Anson does not have a town manager. They have an administrative assistant. And under that scenario, the administrative assistant cannot hire and fire. The selectmen as a board make those decisions to hire and fire. So there's a difference between the way Anson is run and the way Madison is run. So there's a couple things that you can do to change that, but I think you'd have to do it in ordinance. I think you'd have to do it at town meeting. So, not to cut you off, Mr. Moody, but the town of Solon is looking to do the opposite. The town of Solon has always had 3 selectmen and they make all the decisions. But they're looking to go to a town manager / administrative person form of government, and to do that, they have to go to town meeting and change it.
The only thing I was gonna mention, Tim, is that in the past, with the town used to have a hiring committee. You know, for example, when we had a police department, okay, there was outside agencies brought in, but there was also somebody off the board would sit on that committee, all right? And a lot of the reason was that that person that was on that committee could sit in here and answer all the questions that went as far as the interviews and stuff like that, and what they thought about the person, which I think is a good idea. I think the board members, some of them at different times, should be involved in some of the positive hiring of some of these people. Should have a little bit of say, you know, at least be able to ask questions and stuff. Yeah, and I know this is the way it used to be in the past.
And I think that personnel policy does allow for that.
Yeah.
What you had mentioned last week, or last meeting, was that language probably needs to be made a little bit more flexible
Yeah.
to allow for that type of committee.
Yeah.
So,
And I have one other thing. It said in the annual report, when we took it to the people, that anybody hired after the town meeting was the wages or salaries, whatever they were getting, the position, that this would be settled by the select board.
so the article in town meeting actually says that the selectmen shall set all of the pay and salaries.
Right.
And the way I've always interpreted that is you get your first crack at that in February when we start talking about the budget. Not that the selectmen are involved in everybody's pay.
Yeah, the way I interpret this, it says, to see the town will vote to authorize the select board to set all wages and salaries from the coming year, with the exception of the already provided for. So if you hire somebody after the town meeting, then we should be the ones who select, we should be the ones to set the salary or wages.
We can certainly talk about that in a future meeting.
Yeah. And I just have one more thing. And this has been bothering me for a while. I just thought I'd bring it up tonight. And it has to do with that the August 8th meeting, when we talked about no's and yeses and things like that, and we voted no on a full-time code enforcement officer. Okay, it was no big deal. We just voted no because it's always been that way, or whatever the reason was. And my concern is, we voted 2 more times after that. I didn't think that was right. And it, you know, it just led to be insubordinate. You know, some of the things I think you're doing are fine, but it's fine. The water's over the dam. I mean, that's all you can do. But yeah, I was not happy with that. You know, I kind of even feel intimidated sometimes. They're coming in there threatening you with a recall, and they take Glenn and they give him, they make him dedicated town annual in the book. That's pretty good. Then 2 years later, they want to recall him. It just doesn't make sense, a lot of this stuff.
So can I respond to that?
Sure, yeah.
I've heard it mentioned a couple of times that we voted 3 times on this. and I just want to set the record straight, and we can go back to the meeting recordings and minutes. On August 8th, the vote was 3-2 not to carry forward money for a code officer. And those who voted against it had various reasons for that. At the next meeting in August, the code enforcement officer asked for an executive session. And in that executive session, there were some issues about personal comments that were made that were addressed. But at that executive session, Mr. Moody asked about, why do we need a full-time code officer? And I gave my explanation again. So again, that was an executive session. If you look at the minutes, it came out of executive session. Mrs. Dwyer made a motion to carry forward the money. Obviously, they thought something happened in an executive session to indicate that Mr. Moody changed his mind. Mr. Vinziano seconded it, but there was no vote. I want you to remember, there was no second vote. Mr. Moody asked for more time. He said, no, I'm not ready to vote on this tonight. Let's vote on it at the next meeting in September. That is why I reached out to Mr. Moody, Mr. Manter, and you to come talk about it, because I knew we were going to have the second vote in September. And after that, it was done. So I do not believe I was being insubordinate. I believe I was following out the requests that I made for carry forward money. And then we were in executive session. There was going to be a vote, but Mr. Moody said, no, let's wait, let's think about it. So we came back to it. Then you had your final vote, and I was done. I was ready to move on. And I'm at that point now where I'm ready to move on. And I want to make it clear, just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding about this recall ordinance. I have nothing to do with this. I did not sign any petitions. I did not ask anybody to do it. To me, it's a pain in the ass because it gets in the way of doing business. We have a budget to prepare. We have a personnel policy. We have people to hire and train. And this is just a distraction, and it makes the town look bad. So that's my thoughts on it.
Well, the only reason I brought this up is because it's been one of those things. I'm the type of person that you hear, I tell you what I think, and if you like it, fine. If you don't, that's fine too.
But you understand, we only voted on this twice.
Okay.
And I was not insubordinate.
But you understand where I'm coming from.
I do.
Okay, anything else? Make a motion to adjourn?
You gotta give citizens a chance.
Oh, I'm sorry, citizens' concern. Yes.
Very well said, Tim. So you must watch the recordings. But for hiring process, I really don't think I'm all for the whole selectmen to be on it, because I really don't think it should be just one person. I feel like that's a way to could lead to biased views. Let's say one of you guys worked with a person 20 years ago and didn't like him then, and it's you on the hiring process, seeing him 20 years later, and you're gonna have a biased review. I really feel like it should be all of you, not just one. And that's my only thought.
Yes.
Hi, Angela Bucher. Is there a place that a resident like myself could get a printout or something to show what the responsibilities of the select people are?
So they're pretty much the same for every town. So I could probably provide you with something from the Maine Municipal Association. So.
Thanks. And secondly, just real quick, I'm new to this whole process of being here and being involved, and I'm sure that it is a complete pain for Tim and all of you, and I have no opinion about this yet, but the people do have a right to be heard, and I think that it's really nice to see that people are speaking out and trying to be involved in their town. So unfortunately, it's causing some problems, but I think it's good that people are speaking up.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Anybody else? Yes, that's it. Motion adjourned.
So moved.
Second.
Well, all in favor?